Hey guys, Jason here. Welcome to another video here on the channel. I'm also recording this on my MacBook. Uh, just because I'm trying this new method of recording out and seeing how it works. But so I'm gonna be doing this for at least the next few videos. But in today's video, I'm gonna be talking about people that say that metal isn't rock. And I'm going to tell you my opinion on that and why I disagree on that sort of front. And so, without further ado, let's get into the video. So, I've heard certain people say that, well, metal is its own separate genre, so therefore it's not rock music. Well, people that say that, they're sort of wrong. Um, And yet, I do agree that metal is its own separate genre that has a bunch of different subgenres. For example, death metal, thrash metal, progressive metal, and they all sound sort of different and they have their different sounds to them. I do agree with that. What I don't agree with is that metal itself, like the whole genre of metal, isn't technically rock music. And why do I disagree on that? Well, because look at when metal first started. Metal itself, the sound of metal, was basically built off of rock. It was built off of influences of rock bands and hard rock bands, which was sort of a derivative of metal when metal first started. But, you know, metal was built from these rock bands. If we didn't have like the late 60s, early 70s sort of proto metal bands like Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, a bunch of other names that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, but all these bands were sort of rock bands. Yes, they were heavier rock bands. They were building up those sound of metal until we got the early metal bands like Black Sabbath and all the new wave of British heavy metal bands starting to come out. But that whole sound was built from rock music, and especially that early period. And then when you get thrash, thrash starts coming around, especially when thrash starts coming around, you have bands that are coming out, and their influences are hardcore punk, the early hardcore punk scene. So don't tell me that don't tell me that metal isn't rock music, because it is. But as I've been finding this out and really been thinking about this, it is sort of a paradox, and why it's sort of a paradoxical answer is because the paradoxical answer I've came to is that yes, rock is metal music, or I mean, let me rephrase that. Yes, metal is rock music, but not all rock music is metal. What do I mean by that? Yes, metal itself was built off of the genre of rock music because of the guitars, the drums, the way that the formula is. Yes, there's different sounds, but basically it was all built off of rock. But not all rock is metal, because not all rock is heavy rock. If you see what I'm saying, because there are so many different subgenres of rock, like soft rock. You have the classic rock stuff, which you can argue some of that stuff is hard rock, and then you have hard rock, of course. You have punk, you have even more or less well-known genres of like acid rock and sort of that psychedelic rock scene. You had the progressive rock, you had you have all these sort of subgenres of rock. Indie rock, alternative rock. I could keep naming all these. So it is sort of a paradox because yes, not all rock is metal music, but metal is rock. Um, but when we get to these early periods of metal, and especially, let's say, from the early 70s to the early 80s, when metal was starting to get popular and was starting to really come out, there wasn't a lot of the bands were, you could say that they're hard rock and metal sort of the same. They were sort of the same genre, but before they became, so before they branched out into different sort of genres, when the 90s came around, more like, uh, but for that early period before metal really started getting its footing in the door and building up its sort of subgenres, I would say after thrash, that's when we could say that people's and bands' influences were primarily metal music. But before you could have metal music, you have to have rock music. Basically, a good analogy I could use for this is, say you have these dumbbells. I have a dumbbell. Uh, this is like an adjustable dumbbell, so it has weight plates on it. Um, but this is a dumbbell. It's a dumbbell. I'm holding it right now in my hands. And the analogy is, think of it like a dumbbell is a type of weight, but not all weights are dumbbells. But dumbbells fit into that category of weights. Yes, there's different types of weights. You have different types of dumbbells too. But there are different types of weights. You have dumbbells, kettlebells, uh, barbells, weight plates that you have to put on the barbells. But you also have different types of dumbbells, because you have adjustable dumbbells, you have regular dumbbells, you have metal dumbbells, you have more plastic looking dumbbells. So that's really the analogy that I can come up with for this sort of argument, that metal is rock, but rock in the grand scheme of things isn't metal, because there's so many different subgenres that sound different in rock. But why we do say that metal is its own genre, metal was still built off of rock music, and rock music, or metal music, couldn't have existed if we didn't have rock music. If you didn't have rock music, where are you going to get metal from? Because it's basically, if you go back to the basics, forget about all the technical, sort of sounds and all the different subgenres. If you go back to the basics of what metal truly is, it was built off of a rock formula. You have guitars, drums, bass, vocals that are rock sort of vocals, rock melodies. The way the song structure works is rock, and even blues influence. Because yes, we could even go way back and say that a lot of rock stuff was influenced by blues. And we could go that far back, but as far as metal goes, metal was influenced by rock, and there's really no way you can argue your way out of it, because that's what it is. It's just that simple, and I don't really understand why people think just because metal is technically its own genre that has all its subgenres, that you can't really call it rock, because it is, at the end of the day, it's rock. That's all you can say about it. It is a rock genre. So that's my thing on this. That's my thing on this sort of thing of, is metal a rock or not? And what I have to say about it is, yes, it is. That's my simple answer. It's sort of a paradox. If you really think about it deeply, like I explained earlier in the video. But at its core, metal is a form of rock music. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that interesting argument. And I'll make sure and give the video a like if you liked this topic that I talked about in this video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and, well, I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.